Welcome to Plain Talk, where a frequent theme of late in my writing and I think here on the show is the process through which we appoint replacements when there's a vacancy in the legislature. And we've had a spate of them. A couple of them caused by lawmakers passing away, which is terrible. A couple of them caused by lawmakers resigning. The most recent one, district, or at least the most recent one that we did an appointment process for, was Representative Emily O'Brien, District 42. She went to work in the Governor Kelly Armstrong's administration. She is the assistant director of the Department of Health and Human Services. That created a vacancy in District 42. And the reason why this is so important is because I think it illustrates a long-running problem, challenge in the North Dakota Republican Party, which is that increasingly the people who are participating in local level politics, I don't think are all that representative of, at times, are not all that representative of the larger Republican electorate, or let alone the larger general electorate in North Dakota. And the reason for that, I think, is that there are shenanigans being played with rules where sometimes people aren't allowed to know the rules. Sometimes people aren't allowed to know when the meetings are. Sometimes people aren't allowed to participate because of some arcane set of hoops that they have to jump through in order to get there. District 42 was one of these, the appointment process. And I say that as proof of the fact that what's driving this is principle and not just outcome. I don't like the process when it elects somebody I don't like. And I don't like the process when it elects somebody I do like. In District 42, Dustin McNally, who has been on the Plain Talk before when he campaigned for the legislature last cycle, and ultimately didn't win in the primary, but he was appointed in District 42, and I like that outcome. I think Dustin's going to be a good lawmaker. I hope he's going to be a good lawmaker. I guess we'll be paying attention, Dustin, and we'll see. But Dustin's joining us today. I'm glad that he ultimately won that process. I did not like the process. It's got to be a better process. And I'm almost to the point where I'm not sure that local party committees should have this authority anymore. If they're not going to wield it in a way that is open and accessible and transparent to the public. Because remember, we're not just endorsing a candidate here. We are appointing somebody to an elected office that belongs to everybody in District 42. And by extension, everybody in the state of North Dakota. So it's very important. But we want to talk about that process a little bit today. So welcome, Representative McNally. Am I the first one to call you Representative McNally? Probably not.
Well, I'm not sworn in yet, so probably.
Okay.
Certainly the first one on this podcast.
Yeah.
Well, Dustin, tell us a little bit about the process you went through in District 42.
Yeah, so it's, it just started off on a bad beat. So, people showed up. We were told we could pay dues at the door. So there's a call for the meeting to just vote on the vacancy replacement. There's really no other requirements other than said, yes, you have to pay your district dues, $42 at the door. But you get to the door and you start going through the process and you pay your dues. And if you paid at the door, you get a red wristband. If you had paid beforehand, never even told that was something you should do, you get a green wristband. And then, somebody on our committee decided to start keeping the red wristbands out for a while, coming up with excuses that only the green wristbands could go in right away and they needed priority seating or something like that. But then we get into the meeting and going as expected until first motion is let's get rid of the membership roster because they cannot be verified, even though everybody showed proof of their residency coming in and paying their dues. So it just started off on a bad footing, seeing that there's two different colored wristbands. I knew something was up. We knew, just waiting to see how it played out. And it just really upset a lot of the people in the meeting.
And so how many votes did you, so ultimately you go through some shenanigans and every delegate is seated, correct, and is able to vote? And then how many candidates were nominated? Can you just walk through sort of how the voting went?
Yeah, so initially, Connie Osowski, who is Representative Doug Osowski's wife, she's also on the committee. So whoever was nominated and seconded could be a candidate. Then we got 5 minutes to speak. So there's three of us. It was really Connie, versus me. And then there was another lady that also ran, but I don't think she was all too serious about it. But so it was three of us. So there was initially, to win the vote, you need a majority plus one, not just a majority. So then we kicked out the lowest person, and then it ended up being a 20 to 17 vote.
2017, I think it was.
Yep, 2017. But again, it took two failed administrative reasoning ballots to actually get to vote it again. So the whole meeting, even the people I think on the other side were upset about how it was being run. I mean, people were just, everybody raising their hand, wanting to comment about that rules of who gets to vote and who doesn't, and what's the correct parliamentary procedure. So our parliamentarian was inexperienced, and I was getting information from a certain Brandon Pritchard in the back telling him how to disrupt the meeting. So, it just was a bad faith effort all around.
Brandon Pritchard, for people listening, he is a former lawmaker. But also an activist. He works for a out-of-state group that is here to basically try to defeat moderate incumbent Republicans. Brandon campaigned on that, didn't do very well last election cycle. In fact, lost his own seat. Now lives in District 42 and obviously was being a distraction there. Well, one of the things that fascinates me about this, Dustin, is in my decades of writing about local politics, the one thing the political movements want is for people to join and participate, right? I mean, it seems like one of the immutable realities of politics is that you win by addition. You win by bringing people into your coalition and then getting them out to vote or getting them to the right meetings. You don't win by excluding people. But in this little hothouse, I mean, this is kind of where we're at. We're seeing the Republican Party, and I think it's probably a product of how wildly successful the Republican Party's been, where they're in a position now where it's like, well, we don't want a Big Ten. We don't want everybody participating. We want to wield the power and the very powerful brand that is the Republican Party. We want to wield that without the help of all the people who helped build that brand. That's what I'm looking at right now. At this long term, if this sort of thing continues, I don't think it's sustainable for the party. Do you agree?
Yeah, it's very difficult when only 37 people show up to a meeting to choose the next representative to fill a vacancy. I mean, it's very difficult to get people to go to a meeting, especially when it's going to be a clown show. Nobody wants to sit through 3 hours on their Saturday afternoon trying to get through rules on how people are going to be voted on. So when you bring new people,
it would be one thing, I think, if it was just boring, because a lot of those meetings are boring, even when they're
yes, correct.
It could be very boring. But I think the problem is you show up and then it's confusing, and then people are shouting at each other and point of order, and it takes flipping forever. I mean, feeling like I would rather just go play golf.
Exactly. Yep. Or get to the football game or do stuff with your kids. And so it's difficult to get people engaged. Then when we finally find people to be engaged, they're turned off from the way the meeting is run. And so it's just more of a challenge. People are just, willing to let, I think, the small groups kind of run these things, assuming it's being done in good faith. And maybe once they hear that it's not, we'll get some more activity from more of our residents. But when it's 30 people in a meeting to choose somebody, really it's who brings the most people, who can get more of their friends in the district to show up.
So Dustin, I agree 100% with Rob. I think this whole process is a disaster and has been. Again, I don't care if it's a Democrat seat or a Republican seat. I don't think that seat belongs to a political organization. But you are now the representative from District 42 for the interim. It's my understanding you're going to run in the primary. I assume that you'll be challenged through that process. I mean, I assume you're hoping you don't, but are you preparing as if you will have a primary challenge?
Yeah, I assume I will, if not from the person I ran against, somebody else. I think there's just a lot of interest in getting your type of candidate on the ballot.
Right. And so what's really intriguing about your candidacy this time and last time to me is you're an engineer. And what I know about engineers is you work on facts. And I think facts are a very, very important thing that are often missing in our political debates. So can you talk about, why you wanted to run, what you think you'll bring to the interim, or what would you bring to the next session? Because I don't think we have a lot of engineers in the legislature right now. And if you could just simply, I don't care about your ideology, just bring facts to the debate, I would be super excited about it.
Sure. My light's turning off on me, but
Yeah,
yeah,
you're a
so
really good engineer. You can't even keep your lights on
I
over
know,
there.
trying to save electricity.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, some of the committees to be on, like one is on, advancing nuclear power, and you look at who's on there. There's, maybe it makes sense to have an engineer on that panel in lawmakers. So that's one I put in for. We'll see if I get it. But really, I just felt like in the past election, my representatives were not representing me and the type of people in my district that I talk to. They're really getting on distractions and bad press in the news. And everybody started telling me, why don't you run? You're an engineer, you're an Eagle Scout, you have good ideas and all these things. So they wanted somebody they could, I guess, trust or, knew would be a good leader no matter what. And of course, having the correct political bent as well. So really what I pitched at that meeting after that dysfunction, I called out the district. I said, this district is dysfunctional. We need to have real leadership here. And that's what I bring to the table is I want to listen to the people in my district because really I've had no clue what my representatives, what their reasoning is on their votes. You don't get any feedback. So I just think a different mindset is what I bring to the table and a different opportunity.
I appreciate that. I also wanted to comment on Chad's Pollyannish assertion that we need facts in politics. Without facts, you can't build a very good bridge. But if you ignore the facts, you can run a successful political career, as many people have demonstrated over and over again.
I don't have to like it though, Rob.
No, I don't like it either. But that cynical reality is something that we have to live with, unfortunately. I do like, Dustin, a willingness. I see a lot of, I talk, as you might imagine, I talk to a lot of politicians in general. Because I live in North Dakota, I talk to a heck of a lot of Republicans. And I hear a lot of people talk about the problems in the party and the problems with what I think is not a majority faction in North Dakota politics by any stretch of the imagination that is wielding sort of an outsized amount of authority. I mean, when you look at the state Republican Party censuring our very popular governor, who has the high in a poll released last month, has the highest approval number of any statewide elected official who was measured, and they censured him twice. I mean, kind of tells you these folks are out of step. But there's not a lot of Republicans who will talk about it publicly. I mean, I think that's kind of interesting about you. Is like the first thing you went through this process and you won, and the first thing you do is like that process sucked and the district's a mess. And I'm putting words in your mouth now, but that's kind of the gist I took is you're saying these things. Why do you think more Republicans aren't doing that right now? Because I know there's a lot of them that feel that way, but they don't want to criticize the party.
Well, it definitely doesn't help me with the people I now have to work with in my, on the committee. It puts me on a back foot. So maybe it's something I should have been a little bit more calm about. But really, I don't know who's listening. Who's really going to care that we're calling out some of these people in this behavior. Only when it's really shocking, I think, is it, and people see it. Like at that meeting, people showed up and they were offended by how they were being treated, and now they want to change it. Now we have a group of people that say, yeah, that's not the way it should be.
I'm imagining, I'm just being in that room. It's like I show up and I pay my $42 to become a member and then immediately get told, but we don't want you to participate. Like, I feel like I'm showing up at a restaurant and I put my money down for a steak. And then they're like, well, you used a credit card and not cash, so we don't want to give you your check. Get out of here. Yeah. That's how we're going to treat people? That's how we're going to build a political coalition?
Yep. And I talked to the person afterwards, and his excuse was, I'm just playing the game. The game's there. Got to play the game. It's like, but now we just lost 10 members that don't ever want to come back.
Yeah. I am all in favor of the game if the game is I'm trying to make a better argument than the other side, or I'm trying to have a really good ground game and fire my voters up and get them to the polls and organize them. Sure, that's the game. The game is not I'm going to use rule shenanigans to try to block people I don't like from participating.
Right.
That's not the game. That's cheating.
Yeah. So Dustin, I think one of the things that's interesting about District 42 is obviously the district convention is generally something that works in the favor of the other side of the GOP faction, and you were able to win that. But I think what's difficult about District 42 is because of the makeup of the district, on college campus, there's always a really, really, really low voter turnout in the primary. And so, and you saw with your race for the Senate last time, I don't think anybody got that much over 300 votes, or I haven't looked at
Yeah,
a couple of years.
600 voters total or something.
Yeah. So how do you, it's one thing to try to motivate 20 people to come to a district convention for 3 hours, which is very, very difficult. But I think, who votes in that primary is going to determine if you're the nominee or who the Republican nominees are in District 42. So how do you motivate people to care when there's not going to be a heck of a lot of other things on the ballot in June of 2026?
Yeah, and that's a big issue because even in the last primary, there was a lot of money spent. And you look at the voters that turned out, it was a lot of money to get one voter to show up. And
Yeah.
it's going to be worse the next time. But I just think maybe the personal touch. So getting back in touch with members that have disengaged and making them aware. I think this news story is definitely going to drive some attention of, if we show up to a meeting, we should be able to vote, following the rules. So it's going to be really a lot of effort to try and connect to people.
Let's talk about your priorities. I mean, you're in the legislature now, and granted, you're going to have to win another election before you participate in a regular session.
2 more.
Well,
primary in general. Yeah.
Primary in general.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. You're going to have to be successful in another election cycle.
There you go.
Thanks.
Correct.
Thanks, Mr. Pedan. Let's talk a little bit about your priorities as a lawmaker. I mean, you talked a little bit about them. I mean, bringing an engineering background, I think that's very helpful. I'm always thankful of the broad spectrum of backgrounds. Somebody like Dustin Holly. I love hearing about the perspective of a dairy farmer. That's very important. Dairy industry. I mean, it's people like that, all sorts of people. I think it's great. What are your priorities? I mean, what are the big issues facing this state that you're really interested in tackling?
Well, I think part of it is still this battle that just happened is we have a limited amount of time in the legislature. We should focus on real issues and not virtue signaling and battles with other people and, within the party stuff. And so getting to work would be one thing. I don't want to, spend all my time discussing issues that aren't going to go anywhere. But the other thing, our budget, I am a fiscal conservative, so I want to look at the budget, make sure, we're being wise with the spending. And then what I heard from a lot of residents in District 42 when I was knocking on doors, one is the property tax, I'm sure is still a big issue. I keep hearing that from people now. Even though they passed property tax relief, I don't think many people are happy with the format of it. So that's going to be another big issue.
Yeah, and how about the social issues? I mean, when you ran, I think last time, one of the things you said, it was just about priorities, right? Too much time being spent on book bans and those kind of things. I mean, as a member of that GOP caucus, where there are going to be people whose priorities are focusing on those things, how do you work with those folks, not in an adversarial way, but sort of hey, we're only here for 80 days. Let's do what the people want to do in terms of providing, childcare, all the different things that when I'm sitting at my dining room table or sitting with my family, they're not talking about book bans. They're talking about how are they paying for stuff and are their schools good? I mean, how do you get folks in your caucus to focus on those things when often the stuff that's sort of driving the narrative is the social things?
Well, and where they're getting that narrative from depends on their social media feeds and all those things. So if I'm able to connect with more of my, my constituents and explain, these are the things I'm seeing as a priority. These are why I'm focusing on those. These are how it fulfills our conservative values. Then I'm hoping that there'll be less, I want you to do X, Y, Z and forget about the actual conservative things. So just counter messaging, explaining my priorities. Yeah, I'm sure there's definitely going to be some votes that I'm going to have to listen to my constituents on and explain. Maybe I personally disagree, and let's see what foundational value of it goes back to and make a decision off of that.
I want to think, and that's the problem is I think, we all do some wish casting. I think everybody, participating in this conversation right now would like to think that North Dakotans are going to be really motivated by someone who goes there to address real challenges that they're facing, whether they're roads or childcare or having enough jobs or having enough workforce to fill jobs more is really the more pressing problem in North Dakota. I would like to think people are motivated by that. Sometimes I get the idea that there are significant factions of the public that want somebody to go there and be very performative, and they really do. I mean, as much as I like to believe that there's not a constituency for, you know, the culture war issues that we all talk about. I'm laughing at Dustin. If you're not watching
Trying to get my light.
Dustin's light keeps going off. He has to wave his hands to turn his light. Yeah, great engineering going on there, Dustin. I'm sorry. But there's a constituency for the culture war. As much as I'd like to think that it doesn't exist, it exists. It's real. So how do you grapple with that and say, let's focus on things that really matter and making sure bridges don't collapse and the roads are plowed and you know, childcare is a service that is accessible and available.
Yeah, some of those main issues, and when we get some of those wins, announcing it far and wide so they can be proud of something like, yes, this is impacting me. I think the public, you got to give them some wins that they can talk about to their friends and coworkers and things, so they're not talking about, oh yeah, I saved $100 on my taxes. Well, you're right, they're going to switch to the populist kind of ideas that are water cooler talk. So it's a challenge, but getting some real wins in their pocket in other ways that are, you know, more, you know, actual feel in their wallet or actual conservative ideals, give them those things to talk about.
Dustin, taking us back to that room again where you got the nomination, did people think it was weird that the current legislator's spouse was the other candidate? I've never heard of like a couple being the two House members. I mean, I know that there's been times where couples have ran for office together.
Yes.
But did people are like, hey, really? The other candidate's Doug's wife? Did people think that was weird?
I honestly don't think they cared much. To me, it was odd. You know, I could see her filling in like, okay, he had to quit. It would make sense. Maybe she steps in.
Right.
No,
Right.
right. Or if he wasn't running, for her to run because she has experience on the committee. But in general, really it came down to, again, who are your buddies? Who's your family members? There's a big family connections in our district and they show up to the meetings. So they wanted somebody from their tribe and they are distrustful of somebody outside of that. So being a different type of person than them, working the university, I mean, they just, you know, they're judging a book by its cover.
Right.
They're saying I'm paid to run or I'm corrupt for some reason. You know, they just don't bother to listen to the candidates. They already have their mindset who they're voting for.
And why did Brandon Pritchard not run himself?
I don't think he's been in the district for 30 days.
Okay.
And he's going to law school, so he may not want to be a lawmaker. But yes, he was definitely in the background, helping support his preferred candidate.
Gotcha.
Which didn't work, by the way, in multiple ways. They pissed off some voters they brought to the meeting.
Yeah.
That then switched to me.
That seems to be a very Brandon Pritchard outcome.
So the reason I won was they were so heavy-handed with their tactics.
I'm not going to say anything about the law school thing. It is very interesting. And what you said about there being small, I hear that in a lot of districts, that there's like a church congregation or a large family or group of families or whatever that kind of take over a district and run it. And I think that is one of the problems that is going on here. And I think it's a product of, there's just not a lot of participation in general. So if you can get an organized contingent of 30 people or so, you can run a district like that. But I think it's one of the problems with this process. And overall, I would really like to see some changes in the way that this works. I don't will be, because there's a faction that the status quo serves very well. But I don't know that it's serving the people of North Dakota very well, and that's the most important thing.
And I think it did serve the normal Republicans for a while. They had rules that, you know, you have to pay your dues so far ahead of time and those sort of exclusionary things. But really, if
I'm not endorsing that either.
Exactly. I don't know what the solution is, but I just think if you're not getting 100 people at your district meetings for an important vote, you're not getting a good representative choice out of that sample size.
30 people in Grand Forks is not a good turnout.
Yeah, out of, what is it, 6,000 potential voters or whatever it is.
Yeah, not great. Dustin, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, Dustin.